around us when we have information like this. Information like you've been sharing with us, you know, the Kali Yuga and the time frame we're coming into. And then you boil it down to these idiotic people who basically control the world. And they don't want to know anything about really what it's all about. They still have their...
That's not true. They don't want you to know. They don't want you to even think about it, but they're desperate for it. They're desperate for that knowledge. If you go and do, as we did, a scan of all the thousands of pages that are available, written by these people, about a number of subjects, you find that they leave clues about their thinking throughout all of their documents in places like if you went shopping for Council for Foreign Relations, for instance, right? You read through all their documents and you prepare a series of words and emotional descriptors out of that. You learn some very interesting things about these individuals. They are driven beyond our understanding of it. They know time is short, and they're desperately attempting to get this knowledge.
Okay.
Now they're doing it for a stupid reason, which is to try and preserve their individual corporeal life.
And power on Earth.
Correct.
But you're saying, Clif, that these individuals, and obviously, you know, this administration or the previous ones are not the ones we're talking about, because these guys couldn't find their way in a lighted hallway. But we're talking about truly the individuals who control everything. You sometimes refer to them as the powers that be, but it's probably beyond them. You're saying that these individuals actually have the knowledge and awareness of what we're talking about right now, about what the universal structure is and where humanity fits into it.
Correct.
Holy, If that's the case, then these people are more evil than even I ever realized.
That was a conclusion I came to as well. And of course, you have to understand that I'm perfectly a nut job. Absolutely no question about that.
Well, welcome to the club.
My particular thing for being a nut job is I'm driven by data.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, it really pissed me off when I considered that they knew things they weren't sharing.
Wow. If they know this stuff, geez, I don't even know what category to put it in. Things that I have heard is the true reason for us invading Iraq. The underlying theme that everybody thinks is reality is because of oil. No, it's not.
Nope, doesn't relate at all.
Not at all. You're absolutely right. That's why the day we went into Baghdad, we had dozens, if not hundreds, of trucks took everything out of the museums.
There was also a caravan that took a left turn and headed off a ways.
Into the desert.
Correct.
Exactly. Oh, thank goodness, Clif. Do you want to address that a little bit? Because I want people to understand, quite possibly, what truly is going on.
Well, if we look at things, there's a real good thinker in the planet now, this guy Graham Hancock. He does a lot of really good work. And he's got this theory about, well, certain areas of the planet, where most of the coastal areas of the planet were all inundated in a rise of water of about 120 meters.
Yeah.
And certain areas came out first and recovered first. One of these areas was in the Indus River Valley, and another area was what we currently call the Baghdad or Iraq area. And he doesn't go into this particular... there's a lot of vague references in some of his work to the idea of time gates or star gates as we see on the television shows.
Right.
And he doesn't get into it. He does not address it. No one really expects him to. He's after trying to force the archaeological world to open up their eyes a bit. But there's a mythos that is connected with these places, both the Indus River Valley and the area we now know as Baghdad, that indeed these were the centers of, if you will, communication and transportation. They were kind of like the hub of an airport, centering around methods whereby things could be moved at great distances without having to actually get in a ship and go there.
Interesting, now, because...
it's also curious that there's this whole Egyptian mystery school of knowledge, which they claim, the Egyptians that theoretically were housing this particular school, claimed to the public at large knowledge came from, Baghdad and that area. That they were the descendants of the Babylonian priests, etc. There's, like I say, our onions are really multifaceted here. We've got to be real careful.
Yeah, you're darn right.
Even that is a misdirection, because a lot of their stuff they took from Zoroastrianism, which was 1,000 years older, and so on. But even so, all of their myths, including many of the deliberately carved, exquisitely carved hieroglyphics that we can precisely date, show batteries, fluorescent lights being used inside the current Egyptian additions to the Narmer works, and the Egyptians used electricity and fluorescent lights to explore the pyramids and other structures when they were doing their archaeological work. So such technology clearly existed back then, and Baghdad was full of all kinds of primitive batteries and so forth, and also other things that weren't quite as primitive as perhaps they would appear to be. So, for instance, there's some suggestion that, according to some literature, that would sort of make sense that at a time when the magnetic field of the Earth was a great deal stronger, it was possible to move very many heavy objects by eliminating their weight and only having to deal with their mass. And we eliminated their weight by the introduction of humans. Eliminated the weight of these objects, including giant megaliths that might weigh hundreds of thousands of tons, by introducing between the object and the ground a layer of vibration coming from sound. And there's also quite detailed instructions in some of the Egyptian things about how to take your obelisks, which were always horizontal and never standing up, and strum on them in order to focus down through the point of the obelisk, the sound you needed to get it between the structure and the object. And then you just had to push it. And
it would float?
Correct. It was always floating a couple inches off the ground on a vibrational layer of sound, basically.
Jeez. And, even that knowledge and the stories of that have been around probably for hundreds, if not thousands of years, but at least in our lifetime, I've known about that, my gosh, I'll bet you for 40 or 50 years, and there is, what is it in India? And you probably know, Cliff, but when they play a certain tone, this rock will float.
Oh, the lingam, what's known as the Shiva lingam,
Yes, right. Which, because you tried to tell people that, and they look at you like you just fell off the turnip truck.
No, they look like you came through that door when the guard wasn't looking.
Right. Or snuck out when the guard wasn't looking.
Right.
And yet, there it is. I mean, my gosh.
And all you have to do is postulate that the magnetic fields were stronger, which we know is the case. And then how do things behave in an area when the magnetic field is 4,000 times stronger than it is now?
4,000 times stronger?
Actually, if we look back, the last time we had a great flooding event, 12,450 years ago, more or less, the magnetic field at that point apparently went through a shift. Charles Hapgood in The Path of the Poles, you can go and look up in his book about it. And at that point, the sediment layers would appear to show that the magnetic field of the Earth was about 4,000 times stronger than it is now.
How would that have affected, let's say, human life and life in general?
Well, we have a bunch of scientists postulating right now that based on the trace magnetism left in the layers from which we've extracted dinosaur bones, that it may have been on the order of 40 or 50, 60,000 times stronger than it is now. Jeez. And the only thing that allowed dinosaurs of size to exist was magnetism that would have allowed water to be hauled up essentially miles of capillaries to your little tiny brain at the top of a giant brontosaurus. And that such creatures could not exist now because the magnetism wouldn't support cells of that height. They would just turn to a mass protoplasm and collapse.
Yeah. And it looks as though a lot of humans are at that same stage right now where they're not getting nutrition up to the upper cells of the brain.
Well, curiously, when we came out of the last flood, the literature that we see are coming out of the Hindus, and what was misidentified as the Shivavistas, those people that worshipped Shiva. But you have to understand the concept of Shiva. It's not really a personification of God. But in any event, the mythos that came out after the flood there said, better do your yoga every day. And chief among the yoga moves are these three: the standing forward bend, sitting forward bend, and headstand. All of which are going to get more blood and nourishment to your brain.
Well, which is true anyway. I mean, and maybe not for the reasons they're saying it, but just for that a basic reason is to get more blood going into your brain, which the average person, because we don't do, I guess, the daily exercises or the daily movements that maybe our ancestors did, that we really do need it.
Yeah. It's quite true. I mean, the humans, as a rule, up until 1900, the average was, including in America, that everybody walked 1,100 miles a year. So no wonder we were thin, could eat vast quantities of horses and cows at every meal and never really get sick as a result. We had things like rickets and other deficiency diseases, but those conditioned diseases that are killing us off now did not exist.
Interesting, huh?
Coincidentally, if you go in and you read some of the Taoist literature, they say if you can get to the point at any age of being able to do the headstands appropriately and can do it for 3 hours a day, you will return to, and then they describe an age where conditions were perhaps different, and they say you'll extend your lifespan to what it ought to be, you know, and they use flowery language to say you'll live forever, but basically they're talking about living a robust 120 plus years.
But to stand on your head for 3 hours a day, number one, who has the time? I don't.
Is that, certainly. And you have to know how to do it. I mean, it's not like you just...
Yeah, because too many people over the years have really hurt the vertebrae in their neck.
Oh, and if you've never done it before and you're up over in your 30s, you could kill yourself with strokes.
Absolutely. I
mean, you shouldn't go into this without really knowing what you're doing. Yeah. I was fortunate and started yoga at a very young age, so I do get up and do headstands, and it's not a problem for me. Yeah. I don't do 3 hours because, again, as you point out, who has the time?
Right, yeah. And obviously it works on you because, look, I mean, in all seriousness, you're a very bright guy with fantastic ideas, where I feel like some bump on a log where I hope nobody comes along and chops off the bump, you know?
Well, I wish you wouldn't put it that way. It is true I've got a certain amount of energy, correct.
Yeah. And what I would suggest, and all you people listening, do not go out and start standing on your head. If you want to do something, do what Clif just said. There are two beginning exercises which you should continue, and that is one with your feet at about shoulder width, just bend over and just let yourself hang. And also,
if you need to, put your hands on the ground or a pillow or whatever.
Yeah, because I can't reach the ground right now doing that.
You wouldn't want to be pitching forward if you were a little unsure.
You don't want to. And then also sit on your butt with your legs together straight out and just bend forward. And then periodically, like every day, building up, because, we'll get sued if 500 people have I didn't, but lay on your stomach off the edge of your bed and let your head hang down below your heart. And do it gradually so the vessels within your brain get stronger.
Well, there's also the other issue, and that is that within the legs of humans, we have all these little tiny valves, and that is what allows us to maintain our blood pressure, and they're one-way valves, and we pump our blood back up through segments. It's not like our veins are 100% continuous tube, and so you literally need to strengthen those because the actual mechanism helps you out later on when you do headstands or shoulder stands or anything where you get your legs up like that.
Yep.
The release of the pressure on those valves allows them a little bit of breathing room, and so to speak, and they get a little bit stronger. But they need to be strengthened.